Got my coffee, and today a very special episode, a summer episode for all of you here. So we're ready to roll. I'm Michael Hanf, Executive Partner at Taival. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. And as I mentioned, today is a very special episode because I don't have a guest here with me. We're getting ready for the summer. And as a special episode for all of you, we went through the archives, so the 12 past episodes that we have, and we basically picked up some of the key topics that our guests talked about when it comes to challenges and opportunities of circularity in their industry, in their company, or in the broader social context. So if you haven't listened to the episodes earlier, it will give you a glance into the episodes. If you have listened to all the episodes earlier, we hope it gives you a reminder on some of the key topics that we discussed. Anyway, we hope you enjoy the snippets from the 12 episodes and you basically get some inspiration and new ideas out of it. As always, if afterwards you feel like sharing insights, ideas, or your perspective with us, please do so either on your favorite podcast platform or by sending us an email to info@taival.com. Now, without further ado, please listen to the snippets from the 12 previous episodes in a best-of compilation. Thank you for joining me on the show today, Jaakko Nauha. Yeah, and I mean, you can imagine models when all of a sudden batteries become resources of new raw materials. So old batteries now it's not waste, but it's something where you can even think about putting a price tag onto them, having a return system like you have with bottles and cans. And with that, you naturally, I mean, if I get 5 cents back on my battery, I have a much higher incentive to return that than I have if it's basically just work for me to get it to a place and I don't even know what will happen with it afterwards. So I think you can think about all of these models where all of these raw materials that I read a quote once: waste is raw materials that haven't found an identity. So I think it's the same here. So you can think about all of these new models where you actually put a price tag, where you put a monetary value onto these resources.
Yeah,
so.
And I think overall on the battery industry, the transfer to electronic vehicles is pushing a very positive pressure on it. So also in the end of the year, there was a discussion in Europe about the battery passport, and that's basically moving forward. So idea is that you kind of have an identification that where does the battery raw material come from, what is the carbon footprint, and then not only stopping after it's been used, but what happens afterwards. So kind of the recycling mandates, and I think this is once we go forward with the electronic vehicles, there's going to be a lot bigger masses of similar type big batteries that are going to be recycled. So it's kind of raising the topic on the table, really.
Absolutely, and I think it has been a topic already that people talk about, which is one of the big downsides. What do we do with the batteries once they're at the end of life? And if you can find solutions where you can use them in different ways, in a positive way, I think that definitely helps with that. Thank you for joining me on the show today, Tommy Newman. Let me ask you a maybe not so trivial question. What does it take for us to solve the plastic equation, the plastic problem, if you want? I want to state it negatively. Meaning from your experience, what are some of the best practices? What are some of the good things you've seen? Before we switched on the recording, we talked a lot about the fact that the world has come a long way since we met the first time and since we all have started to work in this area. I mean, what's your experience? What do you see out there, and where do we still have our homework to do?
Yeah. I think there are two crucial things we need to change. One is funding, and one is incineration. In the Plastics to Bio concept I wrote earlier, I calculated a rough capex requirement. It's not only in infrastructure, but also in education, of about 50 billion euros or dollars per year that is required to change the system. That would enable the education, the collection, the sorting, the building of recycling units, and the incorporation of bio-based feedstock into the plastic stream. Building that system will take 10 years or 15 years with that $50 billion investment per year. But when we achieve it, gradually we will reach decoupling fossil feedstock. We will be using primarily recycling as the tool, and recycled plastics, recycled materials as the feedstock. And we will save more than $100 billion a year on the feedstock cost. So that makes it affordable. That makes it makes the investment worth it. And it also shows that it doesn't really matter if it's 10 years or 15 years to achieve it, because we will save so much money eventually. Incineration is essential because we have built, at least in Europe, in Finland, for example, we've built massive incineration units that are now operating on plastics. We are burning all the plastics that we should recycle. We're generating a lot of CO2. If we would divert that plastic to recycling, we would not be concerned about the. Just yesterday, the head of Finnish Plastics Industry Association, he said that, or the federation, he said that there is not enough plastics for recycling, and the reason for that is incineration. Many countries are still also, especially outside Europe, they're still shipping material to developing countries, and that must stop. There's massive amounts of feedstock in the developing countries that could be repurposed.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Jukka Viitanen. Decisions made today often take a long time to take effect because of these long life cycles. At the same time, decisions made in the past, 50, 100 years ago, basically influence our ability today to recycle, to refurbish, to reuse, to basically be circular, to be sustainable. How do you see the opportunities, but also the challenges in this context of having these really long life cycles in the things you're looking at?
Well, the challenges, they are related to the long life cycles, as you mentioned. For example, the railways that we construct and maintain. Well, the first railway in Finland was constructed 1860 from Helsinki to Hämeenlinna. So that's quite a while ago. The same railway still exists in the same place, but of course the materials that were used to construct the railway originally, they have been changed, I guess, many times. During this time. But how do we today know what kind of requirements will there be on the construction materials in 50 years or in 100 years? Nobody knows, because if we look 10 years back, we didn't even know back then that there will be so many requirements when it comes to sustainability, for example. Yes. And the development is unpredictable. You don't exactly know what tomorrow will bring with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we briefly talked before we pressed record here, and we've been working with a construction company, and one thing they mentioned is that a lot of the construction material that was used 50 years ago in buildings that they're now receiving back for recycling, for reuse and refurbish, basically contain toxic materials. So they cannot even be recycled, even though they would love to do that, even though they're prepared to do that. But political or regulatory decisions 50 years ago prohibit us from doing the right things today. And I assume it's the same in the infrastructure industry.
Yes, of course it is the same. That's true. And we use these railway-specific materials, and they do circulate to some extent quite well in our branch. But there are also these old traditions and habits we work in accordance that once a part of infrastructure, for example, is maintained, the way of working is that we replace the old material with new virgin materials, and that kind of habits they are quite challenging to change, and it takes time.
Thank you for joining me for the show today, Shahriar Mahmoud.
In the textile industry, I think the most important challenge we have is the waste we are producing, and we know that there are a lot of talk, a lot of concern about the landfill, about the incineration of the textiles, but I think we can't just blame to a specific party like the consumers or the retailers or the producers. I think whole chain, the industry need to take the responsibility, and with these kind of new technologies, new innovations, we have a lot of possibility to reduce those. And very importantly, I think we really need to look for how can we turn the waste into real product.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Timo Huhtamäki.
I once calculated if people in Finland would sell all the extra inventory they have in their closet, it's worth of billions of dollars, or billions of euros. And I also calculated that our defense budget in Finland is 6 billion. We could have 1 year of defense by selling our clothes. That tells that there are huge volumes behind these.
No, absolutely. And again, I have to admit, I can completely relate to that. And as you said, you don't use a large percentage of the things you have there. I mean, because you have your favorite sweater, you have your favorite pants, you have your favorite whatever, and everything else is basically nicely stacked and never touched, most likely. And most likely it's the same for everyone, not only for me in that context. So, what are some of the opportunities but also challenges you see in the industry at the moment? What are the things? I mean, you spoke already about awareness, people not being aware that they can sell their old clothes. Are there other things where you feel either we as consumers or where the regulator or investors or any specific stakeholder in the model basically needs to do a little bit more or do a little bit something different?
That's a very interesting topic, and I think there are hundreds of things and a lot of details which are related to this. But you were referring to the younger generation. Actually, quite a recent report from Global Data was indicating that the Generation Z, 62% of them started their buying clothes from the second-hand market. 62%. That's kind of like a number which has actually doubled in few years, and that's also a very encouraging number, because when the purchasing power of this Generation Z is increasing, we can see dramatic changes in the purchasing behavior. And also when you were asking about the structures and obstacles and so forth, I think one of the biggest competitors the second-hand has at the moment is the fast fashion. And all the structures in the linear economy, they are so efficient that T-shirt costs €9 or something like that. We all understand that that is exactly the same price point that branded T-shirt has when it's 5 years old. And then there is a question: what are the values of the people? Is it so that you want to have a €9 fast fashion T-shirt or 5 years old Tommy Hilfiger T-shirt, for example? And that is the decision that consumers has to make.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Deborah Dahl.
I mean, we kicked off the podcast in the beginning talking about like the disconnect between the supply chain and the circularity experts. The earlier one not being at the party at the moment. Now, from your point of view, what does it take to get an active solution-centric dialogue going? Speak the same language, have the same words, and how do we take the right actions, be it as regulators, as consumers, as customers, as employees, as investors, to basically get to that vision that I fully subscribe to, that you just outlined? Either scenario, I think, would be perfect if we could reach that in the not too far away future.
Perfect. So I think the biggest one, and don't roll your eyes, everybody, is to get curious. Find out where items around you are coming from. Even if you got it at a local farmer's market, there was a small supply chain. Supply chain brought everything around you to you. And to start imagining what happened with this before it came to me. We often have made-in stickers, but we know that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everyone's short on time, so instead of launching into a huge research project on your own, you could pick up a book from Christopher Mims, who wrote something called Arriving Today. He's a Wall Street Journal journalist, and it's a marvelous book. He physically follows an item from China all the way to a US household. They've also made a 1-hour documentary on this as well, which is well worth the time. And then you can start to just be aware of this global web that we've built. So build that awareness and start to be curious. I wonder where this came from. Then my ask is, please take off your consumer, end user, customer hat and put on your professional hat instead. What can you do in your job to take your process slightly more circular? I truly believe this is what it's going to take. It's not going to be us as consumers demanding. It's going to be us as decision makers in our professional lives changing the decisions that we make. And it's okay if a consumer never actually knows that the process changed from underneath them. It's okay if we compete on other things and collaborate on how can we have more material security and just a better operation overall. So that's my plea, is start to become curious. If you're a supply chain professional already, I know you're super busy. Try to go invite yourself to a couple parties. Find out who is running the discussions on circularity in your company and at least shoot them off an email or two. It should take you less than 5 minutes, and to start making a little bit of noise so that people know that we're here.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Katri Sarenheimer. What are the biggest opportunities that you see for Huhtamäki, but also the industry as a whole? And on the other side, you mentioned the challenges in the transformations and how they are very often are underestimated. What do you see as the biggest challenges towards a circular packaging industry, towards a circular world?
So that's a great question, and I have to begin by saying that this is really a fascinating industry to be in from the sustainability angle. And this is because, you know, what I said in the beginning, if we take food, really our whole product or products that we provide, they are about food security. So looking back 100 years, we used to have an agricultural kind of a setting where you would source your food from nearby, very local. And now we have completely transitioned to global supply chains, at least nationwide, but in most cases, global supply chains for the food products. We have seen this also in the recent years, issues with the supply chains, with inflation. And packaging is at the center of that. We couldn't have this kind of a global food supply chains without packaging, protecting the contents, providing information to consumers. Having said that, at the same time, we are part of the problem because of the issues with packaging waste, because of the issues of linearity in our current consumption model. Still, if you look at the different materials, already in many countries, we have quite a good rate of paper and cardboard recycling. But plastics, definitely more challenging. In the EU, we have almost 40% of plastics getting recycled, which starts to be, reasonable, definitely not good enough. And in other places, it's way less. So the circularity of packaging, that is absolutely the biggest challenge we have. And, it is a systemic change, so we cannot do it alone. No company, no institution can do it alone. So coming together and achieving a change in a short span of time, let's say over the next 10 years, that's going to be the main challenge for sure.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Antti Ruuska. The Green Building Council is an international organization. How do you see, how important do you see the cooperation across different countries, because different countries develop very differently when it comes to topics like circularity, like sustainability. But also, how do you see the value for your 300 members coming from that, being part of this international organization?
Yeah, very good question. I had a pleasure to meet with my fellow CEOs from across Europe on my first week at work, but it was super valuable to kind of exchange lessons on how they are operating with their member companies and so on. But there's definitely value in the international collaboration and having this global kind of a joint organization, because there needs to be things happening in the European level, on the global level. And we, as a single green building council located in Finland, we cannot push those things as efficiently in the EU or in the global tables. So we need those organizations, those levels. But for Finland, together with our organizations, we are in a good position to actually put forward these sustainability or put forward this agenda, because we have such a broad member base. So if we together see that the industry should go to this direction, then we have the kind of a mandate to do so together with our members.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Julian Lauter-Weiss. Through your research and now in the context of your work for the German Institute for Standardization, where do you think we have the biggest area for improvement when it comes to establishing a common language, a common terminology, and the standards that have been very helpful in other areas of our lives? And how do we drive this to a point where it really becomes an integral part of how we think about the topic?
Mm-hmm. That is a very good question, and not such an easy one to answer, of course. But I will maybe give some experience that I've had from this standardization work. So I am a member of ISO Technical Committee 323, which is the official name of the committee that is working on the standards. And basically the national standardization bodies, such as the DIN, send the experts, if you will, to this technical committee. So I'm not an employee by the DIN. I'm just like an associated member, if you will. And the work that's taking place is on the International Standardization Organization, or it's kind of orchestrated by them. So a discussion that is taking place there, and I think that is very emblematic of the discussion around how we talk about a circular economy, is taking place between basically 2 points of view on what a circular economy should be. I would just roughly categorize it into two. One is one where people have a more puristic view of a circular economy. So they say anything that circulates is circular economy. So this could technically mean a economy 100% based on recycling would be a circular economy. And then there's the other point of view where people say we need a more holistic view of the circular economy. And they talk about enablers, they talk about education, innovation, they talk about sustainability much more than the people maybe that have a more puristic view of circularity. And I think that is really what has to be discussed, and that is what is being discussed throughout this standardization work. And where can we find a common ground where the purists basically feel like we are sticking to one standard, we are sticking to one topic, and we are not making this, just opening this huge can of worms that, of course, has kind of a never-ending thing, because then we get into sustainable development, we get into social issues, because of course diversity and inclusion is something that is kind of needed for an economy that can really be circular, because we need to take everyone along. So that is the concern of the one side. And on the other hand, of course, it's very fair to say that if we really want a circular economy, it's not enough to just circulate some materials, but we really need to figure out how can we do this in an environmentally friendly way. And so this kind of this debate has to happen on several levels, but I think it is happening within this ISO work. And my hope, of course, is that we come out with a definition and with some principles that will at least give a little bit to both sides, so we have a starting point from where we can really get going with implementing more circularity measures.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Sissi Pentilä. Finland is very strong in startups and entrepreneurship, and what I feel is happening specifically in the textile industry is that there's a lot of activity currently, entrepreneurial activity. We talked a couple of episodes back about Spinnova, but there's a lot of other players at the moment that really bring innovative new solutions to the table that have the potential to change the industry very, very drastically going forward. So I absolutely agree with you. It has to be like an intersection between all of these players to drive that forward. Now, from your perspective, and based on the initiatives you have been seeing at Reima and you have been involved with, what are the biggest challenges for the industry to adopt circularity and circular business models and operating models? You touched already on a couple of those. And how do you think these can be addressed? And maybe also, what is the role of these different players? And me as a consumer, as a father, and as a person who wears clothes, how can we contribute to making that change happen going forward?
Yeah, that big question. Just a tiny question here. Well, I mean, of course, one of the big challenges is the recycling of synthetics. And you mentioned Spinnova. I mean, there are many initiatives and developments around, natural fibers or plant-based fibers, cellulosic fibers. And synthetics really is the huge challenge, and it's also a challenge for us because we use mostly synthetics for the outerwear especially. But that's also where the monomaterial products that we make come in. And for those who don't know, monomaterial outerwear is where every single layer and then the insulation are made from the same material. So for example, for us it's polyester then, but that means that the waterproofing is also from polyester. But if we don't have the products that we can test it on, then we can't. It's harder to develop. So that's also like our contribution. That we figured that if we make these monomaterial products early enough, then we can help develop the recycling processes as well. Our products can be used to test the recycling processes for synthetics, and that's. I think that's going to be a big challenge for the industry and for outerwear industry especially, because synthetics are such a big part of that. So I would say, also buy the monomaterial products and return them to us, because we've promised to recycle them. And because, if we collect all the ones that we've sold together, that's already like a sizable bulk. It's hard for a recycling facility to recycle just one monomaterial product from you. But we collect them, and also kind of just pay attention to what you're buying. Like if you buy a monomaterial product, then write a note for yourself to say oh hey, by the way, have the second child use this as well, and then return it when it's done. And then as I said, the ecosystem is, of course, I mean, us individuals can't solve that, but that is going to be a challenge of, does it make more sense to then ship recycled fibers maybe to a third country, I don't know, maybe to Turkey, so, or does it actually make sense to ship it back to Asia, for example, for remanufacturing? So those are big questions that we don't have answers to yet. And I think that the industry as a whole is kind of working towards.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Ida Mietinen. We've seen a lot of countries do a lot in this regard when it comes to regulation and all of these topics. How important do you feel regulation is, specifically in the area that Camopac is operating in?
Yeah. It's a really good question. It's been something that I've been really thinking about within the past years. And also what I've learned on the way from Camopac is that most people and even organizations support the idea of sustainable consuming and sustainable solutions, but it's really a different road to actually change the way you're consuming or change your habits. And as I've learned from my experience is that regardless of the change, we do need pretty brave tools in order to change behavior. And that is why I'm really happy that there is now regulations coming in different countries, which is leading the road towards reusable packaging and also financial instruments towards this. And I believe this is really needed in order to make the change.
Thank you for joining me on the show today, Anne Larilahti. Great to have you. And I mentioned already, I'm looking forward to jump into all these different industries. You have been working in a lot of different industries: high-tech, telecommunications, airlines and aviation, and now sports and outdoor apparel and equipment. From your point of view, where do you see the commonalities and the differences between these industries? Are there things that these industries can learn from each other, maybe in the area of circularity or more broadly sustainability?
I think the fundamentals of sustainability remain the same, regardless of the company, regardless of the industry. It's all about understanding your role in the society today and what do you want it to be going forward, creating that positive impact. All industries, all companies have both negative impacts, but also the positive impacts, and you need to work with the balance. Of course, there are differences. It's very different to look at an Airbus 350 airplane and a T-shirt in terms of circularity. But what is similar there as well is that you have to understand the whole life cycle of the products. You need to design them from the beginning with the end in mind. Be it waste management, be it reuse, be it repair, whatever it is. You need to get into that mindset from the start. And that is exactly the same for a T-shirt and it is for a jet plane.
Okay, so this was the 12 episodes we've done so far. The coffee is empty and it's time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. We hope you enjoyed the snippets from the different episodes, the best-ofs, so to say. Just a reminder, we will continue posting our episodes on a bi-weekly rhythm as before, so also during the summer, so you get to listen to new episodes all the time. If you have ideas or topics you want to share with us, please do so on your favorite podcast platform or by dropping us a note at info@taiva.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on the new episodes that I mentioned. There's interesting guests coming up throughout the summer and also then in the second half of this year. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here on the Circular Coffee Break.